Good morning.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Yes, it's
Excellent.
wonderful
Okay,
to
sweet,
see
sweet.
you.
It's
We're,
wonderful to
gi-
see you as well.
we're giving everyone a minute or two to join from the waiting room,
Yeah.
and we'll get started shortly.
So how's everyone doing? Can I get a thumbs up? You guys can also do virtual thumbs up if you haven't learned about the virtual thumbs up. Those are so cool. So I also learned recently how to have it so that it's like my skin complexion, because I most certainly am not orangish yellow. So I just want you guys to know that, right? So hopefully everyone has been able to navigate that as well.
Very, very well. Well, first and foremost, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to have you all joining us at today's Inspire session, hosted by the MGH Youth Neurology Education and Research Program, thanks to the philanthropic support of the Biogen Foundation. My name is Nicta Mejia, and together with Madison Ellen, I am really pleased to introduce today's speaker, Alazar Ayele, who's the Corporate Responsibility Manager and a Community Lab Educator in Cambridge, Massachusetts for Biogen. As always, please remember this meeting is being recorded. I'd encourage you to keep your microphones off, your cameras on, and most importantly, to keep your eyes, ears, and hearts open as we learn together from our speaker. I look very much forward to your questions. So thank you, Alazar, for being here with us today.
All right, I'm very happy to be here. You guys have no idea. So I think I saw a few students of mine already joining. I have the honor of being both a community lab educator, so that's one, and the other part of it is also being able to kind of fit my shoe in what's called corporate responsibility. But if you asked me what I wanted to do, like 10 years ago, I'm telling you, this is not it. All right, this is not it. So I want you guys to understand it's totally okay to shift the direction that you're going in, and then to also come to this really, really weird perspective and reality where you're then again shifting. So we'll talk about that today. And again, Nick Day, thank you so much for hosting me this wonderful morning. Madison, thank you so much for also hosting me as well. It is going to be hopefully a great and I think a great conversation. Some of these things I really want you guys to also ask in the chat. So feel free to do that. I think I have navigated well enough to know how to respond to things fairly quickly and then also see things very quickly. So feel free to also ask stuff, and I'll be happy to also answer in between. Sound good? Let me get another thumbs up. Yes, yes. All right, sweet. I'm getting some thumbs up. This is great. All right. So as Nick mentioned, my name is Alazar. I am the Corporate Responsibility Manager at Biogen, but also Community Lab Educator and Director of our Community Lab, meaning that I get a chance to actually teach young people like yourselves on a daily basis. And obviously, with COVID around, things have shifted, and that's totally okay. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we kind of shifted. But to kind of get started, I want to talk to you guys about who I am. So before we start, though, let's see if this presentation will work. It should work. All right. So who am I, or where do I come from? So where I come from. Anyone want to take a guess where I come from? Anyone? You guys can write it in the chat. If you already know who I am, that's cheating. So we'll have other students who have never seen me before kind of participate. Yes, so somebody wrote Ethiopian. Yes, that is totally right. I don't know how you figured it out. But yes, so I come from a land where people look like that. So these are our southern tribe people. So this is how they typically look. I also come from a country where we truly believe, and I know Nick Day is going to fight me on it, and some other people will definitely fight me on it. We were the first discoverers of coffee. All right. And this is actually the capital city that overlooks what's known as Addis Ababa. So this is where I kind of grew up. So in this little tiny city, well, not a tiny city anymore, but when I was little, it was definitely a tiny city. And this is actually how we drink coffee. As you can tell, that little tiny clay pot is known as a jebana. Starts with a J, J-E-B-N-E-A, jebana. So, and then the little tiny cups there, those are called sinis. So you actually drink out of that, and it's very, very traditional. So that's where I come from. And if you don't know where Ethiopia is, there's a lovely little geographical map for you guys there on the top right, and that's the one highlighted in orange, where we are a landlocked country, but also have beautiful culture, and I totally get to enjoy it because we have over 119 different languages in Ethiopia. Over 119 different languages, over 100 different cultural perspectives and thoughts and ideas. So that's where I come from. But I came to the U.S. when I was 7 years old. are there any immigrants in the class? Any immigrants? Any immigrants? If you're an immigrant, raise your hand. Let me see. I think you guys can definitely use those little tiny responses with hands, right? Right. So that's awesome. So yes, I am an immigrant. So I actually traveled here from Ethiopia when I was 7 years old with my mom and my dad, my younger sister, and my younger brother. So we got on a plane, and I remember one of the first few things I ever told my mom, and I turned to her, and it was literally when we walked into the airport of the Boston Logan Airport. I turned to my mom and I said, "Mom, when are we going to America?" Because in my head, America is land of like gold, and it's apparently really, really, but not with streets and cars. Like we have those in Ethiopia too. So my assumption was we were going into this really, really cool space, but ended up being America already. But it was about opportunities that were there. That was a little different. So I remember being 7 and asking my mom, "When are we going to America?" So to all my immigrant friends who came here and were a little disappointed, I'm going to definitely, hopefully, inspire you a little bit more as to what you can do here that's a little different from other places. Let's see. So this is kind of my historical, like kind of educational route. I know education is very, very important. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So I had the fortunate opportunity of going to a high school in Malden, Massachusetts, known as Mystic Valley. So for those of you who know where that school is, it's been on the news recently. It's also it was a very elite school when I was there. We definitely focused a lot on some really awesome things. I still hold a record for the fastest mile. So as you can tell, I'm a big track and cross country runner. So if you want to ever race me, let me know. I'm totally up for a race. So I can run a mile well, this is way back in high school when I actually had a lot less body weight. I've gained a bit of more poundage now, but I used to be able to run it in 4 minutes and 16 seconds. So that was my wild lap. That is not the world record, but that is my high school record, and I'll definitely take it. And what's really awesome about coming to the U.S. and not just embedding into the high school, but we'll kind of start a little bit earlier, is that I've had the chance to learn the language. As you can tell, I don't have an accent when I speak. I don't have an accent when I speak my native tongue known as Amharic. So that's the tongue that my culture speaks, or a majority of my culture. And my mother's side of the family, my mother's side and my father's side of the family is also from a tribe called Gurage lands. So we actually speak another dialect there too. So I can understand that very fluently. And then there is this other dialect that I also, in theory, can understand if I sit in it long enough. It's known as Orominya. And so we have different cultures, and you're really embedded into this different world. But then coming to the US, you now have to learn a whole different language. So, in learning my English, I remember specifically a few things. One is for those of us who are bilingual or trilingual or quadlingual, if you guys remember learning languages, sometimes you start to kind of jumble the words around. So, or you'll say one word in one language or any of that. So I really remember this one vivid story of being in line. So my name is Alazar Ayele, right? So my last name is Ayele. And that means that I'm always in the front of the classroom. That's what I've, learned. Didn't have to understand the language. Teacher put me there. She was like, "You are in the front." And I said, "Okay, great." And then I remember this kid by the name Chris, who actually came and stood in front of me. Obviously, he has a different last name, and I don't remember the last name at the time. But so Chris came and stood in front of me. And I literally was like, and I'm going to say it, and I hope you guys get a good laugh out of it. So I told him, I said, "Chris, get out of my bota." And bota means my spot in Amharic. And then get out, obviously, you guys know what that means in English. So it was really interesting because that is how I learned the languages. I was always brave enough to, mix up the languages when I needed to mix up the language because it just needs to happen sometimes. And especially when you're like, "That's my spot, dude. Get out of my spot." So I had to actually learn all of that. So it was really nice. Um, and then beyond that, I think one of the positive sides of life was obviously after you learn English, you start to learn about opportunities. So, in my family and kind of looking at my family history, I come from my mom and dad who obviously were working in Ethiopia. And then when we came here, they had to find work as well. And so here, my parents didn't have the same job as they would have had if they were in Ethiopia. So my father was, so he was a water supply engineer. So what that means is you can either work, right, in a place where you basically control the water system and making sure that there's a flow of water from one area to another, contributing in counties, cities, and things like that. So that's what my parents did. And my mother did the same thing as well. But my father had an opportunity to kind of travel and do work on a ship. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen those ship, like the freights, so the ones that carry a lot of stuff, right? So they do imports and exports. So my father worked on that, but what does water supply have to do with that? Well, surprisingly, if you're an engineer, if you're a water supply engineer, you actually have to understand how where when you dock your boat, right, so that massive ship needs to dock at every single station. So to dock that massive ship, you need to have water levels, right? So buoyancy comes into math, right? So at some shipping locations, they don't have the docking stations can be leveled off differently. And because they're leveled off differently, my dad's responsibility was making sure when the boat landed or when the boat was kind of approaching, it would have a smooth transition, but also knowing that the bottom of the boat isn't going to hit the shallow land or it's not going to kind of graze anything, right? So that was kind of my dad's job, which was really cool. And he actually got a chance to see the whole world when in doing that. But when we came to the U.S., that wasn't something he was able to do, and that was simply because he was like, I don't speak the language of English, but I'm very good at like this mechanical work. So he was kind of in struggle. So my dad ended up going back to school, but before going back to school, while he was in school, he worked in a parking lot. My mom worked in a grocery store. So I saw my parents really working hard for all of us, but it was to put food on the table. But one thing that I really admire about my parents is they went back to school. So my mom went to Bunker Hill Community College. She went and got her nursing degree. My dad went and then got a biology degree. And so this is where the science starts to come in. So I remember my dad and my mom sitting and doing homework in the middle of like dinner. So growing up, I saw my parents doing homework. And when you're a kid, you see your parents do homework. What do? Monkey see, monkey do. So I did my homework. So it was so inspirational to have them because they would do work and I would have to do the same. And so my younger siblings kind of followed in the same footsteps. And at the time, we were also living in the project. So I grew up in Malden, Massachusetts, and there's this little tiny project housing system in Malden known as the Malden Housing Authority. So I lived right off of a street called Coleman Street. And then that's where I kind of grew up. And then I got into high school. When I was in high school, obviously, I really loved track and cross country. So I told you I was Ethiopian. As an Ethiopian, you guys know we really love running. So I really loved running. It was really good to just enjoy running anyway. I ran everywhere. And then I joined this other club called Model United Nations. If you don't know what that is, that's basically getting a chance to debate. Now, what is with this guy who barely speaks English very fluently joining in Model United Nations? Well, I absolutely love the idea of different countries coming together to talk about topics. So it was nice to actually travel to Cornell. We traveled to all these other different universities that actually had these what we called Model United Nations, where they deliberate about topics or they deliberate about crises that were happening. And so it was so much fun just to be in high school and to learn about how different countries worked. And you had to do a lot of research. So at one point, I represented the US. At one point, I represented Swaziland. So we went from big countries to small countries. So we had a chance to really learn about different countries, their economic development, their gross domestic product. So these really, really fancy terms that I never would have learned unless I actually was a part of this program. And so it was a really cool after school program that I really enjoyed. Now, a few years later, obviously high school ended. I ended up going to Northeastern. Now, how did I get into Northeastern? I was known as a UGMA scholar. So a UGMA scholar is a person who basically is accepted because of his academics, but also high potential rate in wanting to participate in science or wanting to participate overall. So that was kind of my work. And it was amazing just to be a part of that. And so as part of the UGMA scholar, my responsibility was to make sure I had a 3.0 or above. But on top of that, it was a full ride. So I didn't pay a penny out of my pocket. So it was nice just to be a part of that, right? And so these are the things that I had a chance to kind of participate in at Northeastern University. All right. So beyond that, though, however, I had a chance to also start working. So I started interning, and even in high school, I was interning. I was interning at a program called Dana-Farber, and I'm going to kind of go back and forth between these two slides with everyone, if that's okay. So let's see if I can do that very quickly. So I worked in high school. I participated in a program, as some of you are, right? Some of you guys are in high school, yes? Yes, I see some high school students. I see some head nods in the chats. Okay, great. So I participated in a program called the CURE program, which is very similar to this program, right? So what we did was we basically focused on oncology. Right now, you guys are all focusing on neurology, correct? And so as a result, I got to learn a lot about different lab techniques. So I got a chance to pipette, I got a chance to make mistakes. And I was working at the time at the Massachusetts General Hospital. So I was actually working at MGH in department at Simches Research Building. Hopefully Nick knows where that is. So that's where I was working as a high school student. So I was 16 and a half years old and I was working at Simches and really researching about mice, though I never actually got a chance to dissect the mice until I was like a few months, like near the end. They finally gave me a mouse to dissect. But I was in high school learning about imaging. So we were imaging mice. I actually worked under Dr. Alexander Gumirez. I think he's still there as of last time I checked. So he's an MD, PhD, and a phenomenal mentor because he mentored me in helping me understand mouse models and cancer and tumor. And then I kind of grew from that to really enjoying what science was. And I got to see it under a microscope. And I remember one of the most important things I've ever learned how to do, which was I got to walk around with this guy. So this isn't the same notebook, but I had this notebook that I would always write all of these fancy terms in because, man, do scientists and do doctors talk a lot about these weird terms that they keep saying. So they'll say things like, and hopefully you guys had a chance to kind of talk a little bit about these scientific techniques, but they'll say things like, did you do the PCR on that mouse model? It would be very important to do a PCR and all this stuff. And then they'll say another like oncological term or maybe talk about protein P53. And I'm just like, a lot of fancy words they keep throwing, and I'm not going to remember any of them. So I kept track of all of this in a notebook. So I remember doing that. Um, and then the following summer, I got to participate at Harvard and working in the Department of Biology, working with zebrafish. So as you can see, there's a little A at the bottom right there. That's actually a zebrafish. And what's really cool about that zebrafish is that I actually got a chance to watch it grow, but also dissect its eye. So I learned a little bit about eye anatomy and neurology. And this is where I got completely hooked because now I'm learning about neurology and I'm learning about, all of these different perspectives of zebrafish anatomy, which also couples with human anatomy because they're very, very similar, especially when you're looking at color blindness and how that's affecting the neurology and all this. So there's like little, I want to say little sprinkles of interest in science that all trailed the way for my career. And so this is all done in high school. I want you guys to know I did all of this in high school. And so we'll go back and then I told you guys I got into Northeastern. So at Northeastern, I didn't do a whole lot of sports because I wasn't a big fan of sports. So I did running on my own. And so I really enjoyed running by myself and really kind of enjoying, I don't know if you guys are in the Boston area, but you guys know where Comm Ave is, Commonwealth Avenue, Huntington Avenue, Beacon Street. So I was able to run all of those streets. I even ran Sorrow Drive at one point, and now I still do it as, an adult now. But even then I was still running and really enjoying that. And so it was an it was an experience of a lifetime to go to college to study biology. I worked with some mentors, people who really wanted to guide me through the directions of science because though I had the cure experience, it didn't mean I was a great scientist. It just meant I had what I dipped my foot in. So anyone ever go swimming before? When you go swimming, you don't just jump in, right? I wasn't fully submerged yet. I was just putting my foot in the water just to get kind of an understanding of science. Do I like it? Do I not like it? What parts of it do I like? What parts of it do I not like? And that's what I got a chance to do. And it was so amazing because I took that and I was more excited about science then than I was ever before. And then when I got to college, I was like, I hate science. This is terrible. What is going on? Why do I not like science? Like, what is up with these coursework? What is going on with this professor like telling me I need to memorize this? And so I remember specifically actually having these interactions with my professors where I'm just like, I should know this stuff, right? Like, for heaven's sake, I was a CURE student. I was an MGH student, is probably what some of you guys are saying. I should know the stuff when you get to college. And no, we don't always know everything. So it means that we just need to work a little bit harder. So that's one of the things I learned. And we'll come back to the other two schools that are on that list. But in this time, I was developing my science knowledge because what I did at Harvard, what I did at Mass General, what I did through the CURE program was I was able to just, again, dabble. So when I was more invested in time, obviously, what happens when you spend a lot of time doing something? When you start to spend a lot of time studying, when you start to invest time in really saying, okay, you know what, I need to like really learn it. If I really truly enjoy biology, I have to give it a full chance. Let me see what that chance looks like. And that's exactly what I did. So in doing so, though, I reached out to this professor by the name Tuvia Lieberman. He's out of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center at the time. I know they're kind of like partnered with Leahy Health now, but with Dr. Lieberman, what I did was I learned a lot about genomics and proteomics. But then I also kind of took a step back and remembered about the stuff I was really good at, which is oncology. So I was really good at cancer research. So we studied, so his lab focused on renal cell carcinoma, pancreatic cancer, and prostate cancer. So we really kind of focused a lot on these things. But his was also more of a revolutionary kind of state-of-the-art lab. So what he had was he was actually one of the first few scientists to actually have what's known as an FM matrix and chip assay at Beth Israel. So this is one of those really, really cool opportunities where you get to work in cutting edge science and still catch up and have everyone else catch up to you. So you were using these really cool tools to really be able to analyze data, look at mRNA sequences, look at how this gene affects this protein and how this protein affects this other protein, and what's happening with everyone here, and why is this happening in the cell? Why is the mitochondria acting weird? So I got a chance to learn about all of that and then some in Dr. Lieberman's lab. And then what was amazing is I graduated college, and so I started doing this like my junior year. And so I worked in his lab and I interned for him even throughout the school year. And so I'd come in for a few hours during the week, and it was really nice because I got a chance to learn a lot. But by the time I was done, with school, he offered me a position as his manager. So he said, "Can you be my lab manager? I need a lab manager, someone who's really good at inventory, but someone who also knows people and someone who can also, negotiate on the phone about, cutting down prices on things." So I said, okay, I should be able to do that. So I started building kind of the managerial role in the lab. So it was really nice. So I started kind of, being able to remember how to stock things. And at the same time, I still got a chance to work on my experiments because research in academia is all about knowledge. You're learning. You're getting a chance to say, what can I learn here? What else can I take here? And then, your PI or your principal investigator or Dr. Lieberman in this case will give you a direction and say, hey, can you kind of approach this? I'm not 100% sure where this is going to go, but I had an idea about this. And your job is just to see his idea unfold. And if his idea unfolds and it works really well, he gives you a high five and says, let's see if we can write a paper. If it happens to be a paper, you get published. If it's not a paper, you're just like, oh, it's not going to be a paper. Okay, great. What did we learn from it, though? So you learn about what you learned from this particular experiment. And maybe it wasn't so good. Maybe you made a mistake. So you have to go back and do things again and again and again and again and again and again. So this is what I learned in Dr. Lieberman's lab. So one of the things I want you guys to take from all of this is that you learn things throughout the way. And as you keep learning, and sometimes learning isn't just about making mistakes, it's about knowing the entire lab is making a mistake. Your entire department is making a mistake. Learning together, because that's what academia is, and that's what learning is about, is making all of the mistakes together. And as you continue to make those mistakes, you then are like, maybe we should go and shift here. Maybe we should change here. And so this is where a lot of what I really call my foundational educational opportunities came, especially in the sciences. Now, let's kind of fast forward a little bit and go to 2014. And in 2014, I started really focusing on STEM education. And that's simply because I gave a presentation at one point, and I started talking to students like yourselves about science, where I come from and what science means to me. And so I told the story of myself when I was about 6 years old. And so I told you guys at 7, I came to the US. So at 6, where was I? I was in Ethiopia. And I remember when I was 6, this very, very vivid time where I got a little whooping. So if you guys don't know what a whooping is, that means you're probably lucky. So I was 6 years old. And one of the things I remember is I loved watches. You guys know what a watch is? Yes, everyone knows what a wristwatch is, right? It wasn't an Apple Watch. It was just a normal watch that goes, so it has a little tick to it. So what I remember, and I will forever and forever hold my science skills to this. And so when I was younger, my father, I told you my dad traveled a lot. So in his travels, he got my mom a really nice watch. But this watch ticked a lot. And as a little kid, you're 6 years old and you see something ticking, what do you do to it? What do? You want to learn about it, right? So you pick it up, you put it to your ear. I put it to my ear, it would tick, and I'd put it down. And my mother would say, hey, can you please not play with that? That is not a toy, that is a watch. And so that was one. So, a few days later, I'd see it again, and I'd pick it up, and I'm like, Mom, look, it still ticks. Can you hear it? She'll say, yeah. So one day, she wasn't there. So my curiosity led me to figuring out, well, what made this clock tick? So I took it to the yard, picked up a rock, and just smashed it. Man, did I get a whooping that day. My mother was so mad, and she was like, how could you do this? This is a brand new watch. But that was curiosity. I needed to know what made that watch tick. And to this day, I still am the same way. And so I gave this talk about something very similar along the same lines. And the person who heard me giving this talk was like, can you come and talk to students and be an educator, maybe potentially an educator? You seem like you'd be a good fit. So I said, okay. So I went out and I gave it a try. And little did I know, I actually loved it. So I fell in love with teaching students about science. I fell in love with teaching students about what we get to do. So STEM education became a very important part. So I actually got a chance to start teaching you, so people like yourselves. So, and what's really awesome is I got to teach kids about pipetting. You guys know what pipetting is by now, right? Yes, no. So it's holding a little pipette and you go, and it has a little pump to it, right? So I got to learn how to do that. And then the other part I also got a chance to teach is also about more complex things like transformations. And I told you guys about that word PCR, or known as polymerase chain reaction, making duplicates of DNA. And so I got to start teaching this with students, and students started loving how I taught because I wasn't teaching like your classroom. So I didn't make it boring. I don't think I'm a very boring person. If I'm boring, please let me know. If I'm putting anyone to snooze, please let me know. But the reality was I really enjoyed teaching. I absolutely love teaching kids, and I always try to make you guys laugh by saying things like Instabook and FaceGram. And so people are just like, "What is that?" And I'm saying, because I'm old, right? And so people are just like, it's like yourselves really enjoy that. So I hope to make those kinds of connections with you guys. So we have these great connections, and then I realized that the community needs more work, right? So there aren't enough people like me. So I'm a black man, and there aren't enough of us who are scientists. Why is that? Well, so I asked my executive director, and I know Nick Tay knows who she is, and probably you guys met her last Friday. So Johanna Jobin and I started talking, and I said, Johanna, I really want to work on the foundation. I think we have a lot of work to do. She said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, in Massachusetts, I'm noticing that there aren't enough black scientists around to kind of talk about science. And so I want to see if we can get kids started early in science. And so that became my job. My job became actually recruiting young people to work for Biogen, or to come and intern at Biogen, or to do a summer program. And then to also push you guys towards Nick Day, to have support, to have mentorship, right? And all of this helps you guys, because then all of a sudden it's like there's more people like ourselves. And it's so important to have that, because that's what my big job is, right? My biggest job and my biggest happiness is knowing that kids are actually getting a chance to break watches, to go ahead and make mistakes, to learn from those mistakes, and then to take those mistakes and say, oh, I made a mistake. What am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to go ahead and continue to learn. So this is literally what I get a chance to do every day. And then let's see if I can go here. And then we're talking about what I do now. So I went and got a degree, and I got a master's in science from Harvard, and kind of doing applied biology and kind of learning a little bit about that. And then, by the way, all of this stuff, wait, let's go back. I want to go back if that's okay with everyone. Please forgive me, but I have to do this. So I went for, so after I finished Northeastern, I told you I worked a little bit, then came to Biogen, worked at Biogen. And then in my work at Biogen, I started to expand in these areas. And then I was like, I need to get another degree. Why? Because I think it would help both my students learn a little bit better, but it would also help me to have more of a solidified role as a science person. So I went and got another degree, a master's in science. And so I didn't think the students really enjoyed it as much, but I started to make more connections, started building more relationships with the communities around me, with more scientists. So it was really nice. And guess who paid for it? Anyone take a guess who paid for it? You can write it in the chat if you can. Guess who paid for it? Come on. You have 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Yes, Biogen, not the government, Biogen. But definitely not me. That's right. Not you is, I think, 100% correct. Nope, it was not coming out of my pocket. So Biogen decided to pay for me to get a master's degree. And so it was so nice, because one of the things that we struggle with is, well, how am I going to pay for this? Well, you just have to keep working and work hard. If you work hard and you demonstrate that you're a great worker, the company will do almost anything for you. So that's what I got a chance to do. And so when I finished that, though, a few years has passed. So I started working more. And then I think there's a very famous picture in here. So then I wanted to do a PhD. So this is as of like this past year. So I wanted to do a PhD. So because I wanted to do a PhD, guess who's paying for that? Anyone take a guess? Anyone? Anyone? Absolutely not me, right? So Biogen wants to pay for me to get a PhD. They want me to get a PhD in Alzheimer's disease. And what does Biogen focus on? Neurodegenerative disease. What are you guys working on? Neurology. So it's like, guys, look at the synergy here. Look at all that connections we're making. This is so cool. So Biogen wants me to actually get a PhD in, so it's known as anatomy and neurobiology. And I get to do that part-time. And Biogen's paying for the whole thing. And I just get to just basically learn. Right? It's basically going back, learning, and then getting a chance to apply it, talk to some students like yourselves, make you guys excited about STEM. That's what I get to do for a living. And then beyond that, though, I also get to meet some pretty cool and important people. Not that you guys are not important, but I got to meet the governor. I'm not going to lie to you guys. The governor coming to the office and saying, hey, I want to talk to some kids, that's pretty cool. All right. That is pretty cool. And then other stuff that I want you guys to know is, kind of what I live by. I live by a very, very simple motto in life, and it's these four things. All right. Always and always, always and forever. All right. Always believe in others. I think it's so important to make sure that you believe in others so much, especially in a world where it's so hard to believe in yourselves, let alone that, but to believe in others is so important. I think you need to be able to serve others. That's one of the things that I really, really love about what I get to do, but also really knowing that by serving others, by something so simple, right? I'll tell you guys a very simple thing. You literally washing your bowl at your house after you eat a bowl of cereal, that's serving your mother so that she doesn't have to wash it for you. Believe it or not, but that's a huge service. But little things like that can also add up to be big things. So when you start to think about the big picture stuff, you know that you've always been in servitude to others. The other one is share what you know. I think being in high school and then being in college and then being in graduate school and then being in a PhD program, one of the things that I've learned about all of these, one of the major things I've learned is that we don't share enough with each other about what we know. I think it's like we always keep everything a secret. We try to hide everything. I'm not sharing my stuff. No, I don't think that's how it should be. I think when you're younger, if you learn how to share, not just your toys, but you start to share, hey, this is what I learned. When you see your friend who's struggling in math and saying, hey, let me show you how to do it. I know how to do this. When you work together at such an early age, when you start to actually form what's known as a study group together with your friends, some of you guys are going to struggle. Some of you guys are not going to struggle. And some of you guys are doing great in it, maybe helping the others who are not doing so great. That's so important. Now, I'm not saying go cheat. What I'm saying is definitely saying, hey, look, I know you're struggling in math. Let me help you out a little bit. Maybe you're just having a rough month or a rough season. Let's kind of see what we can do when we share each other's knowledge. Number three is work hard. It is so hard to be in this world right now. We're in a pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, it was just as hard. And then we're also dealing with everything that's happening in social justice. But in all of that, one of the things I want you guys to know is you need to work hard. It is so important to work hard. It's so important to work hard because you have to work twice as hard to be as great, right? So to be great, you have to work hard. It's not easy. I tell you, there are days where I literally have a less amount of sleep because I need to make sure that I'm doing great work on this side. So it's so important to know that working hard is so important. And then the other and last thing is have faith in yourself. I think we need to have time to believe in yourself. We talk about believing in others, but have faith in yourself. It's so hard to actually have faith in yourself. And I know it's hard. It's hard to get up in the morning and say, oh, I have to do this work thing again. Oh, I have to do the school thing. She wants me to go on Zoom. He wants me to do the history homework already. But that was due oh, I don't want to do it It's so easy to say that. But if you believe in yourself and you have faith in yourself, you'll get through it. Because those are just the little things. But then when you get to the stuff you really want to do, no one is ever going to stop you. Because it actually has meaning, because it gives you a sense of purpose and it lets you chase. All right. So with that being said, I think I've wrapped up my 30 minutes. Hopefully I've actually hit my 30 minutes. I did. Okay, great. So that hits my 30 minutes of my Inspire talk. And I'm going to give you guys some time to ask me some questions. And I'm more than happy to answer any question you have. And please, again, any question is up for game. So I'll be happy to answer any of it.
This is amazing. I just want to say a big thank you for sharing your journey and sharing these pearls. I think everyone is as excited as I am and energized. I'm going to pass it over to Maddie. Students have been putting in questions throughout your talk, and so she'll share these with us. Thank you.
And awesome. You're very welcome. All right, Maddie.
Yes,
Shoot.
So I will share my screen to make this easier for you, and you'll see the questions populate on the shared screen, and then once they're answered, I can just kind of flow through them, and students feel free to keep adding questions to the link in the chat if anything comes up. So let me share.
All right, do you want me to stop sharing?
I think it'll let me just do it. Let me see. Looks good. Okay. Present and then do full screen. Perfect. Can everyone see that okay? Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, feel free to read the question and answer it. Once answered, I'll mark as answered, and we'll just flow through them.
Sweet. So what was the most significant medically related experience you had during college, medical school, and residency? Well, I didn't go to medical school. That is definitely not a trajectory I want to go. And I did not, I'm definitely, obviously means I didn't go to residency. But I do want you guys to know something. I did have a really cool experience, not in college, but in high school. I believe one of your speakers came a few weeks ago. His name is Dr. William Curry. So Dr. Curry and I go way back. So when I was just about 17 years old, I actually had a chance to see brain surgery that he was performing on a patient. So it was really cool. It was about 18 hours. So I stood in that surgical room with him for 18 hours, watching him cut open a woman's brain. And then he moved the brain and he was removing cancer from the back of her eye, which was amazing. And it was growing on the bone of her, like right behind her nose. So I don't know, this is an anatomy term that I don't really want to get into with you, but it was right behind her nose bone, right? So it was really interesting just to watch him do that. So that was an experience of a lifetime. And I knew then even that I really wanted to work with neurology and really want to focus on neuroscience. Now, did I go into med school? No, I'm definitely not the kind of person you want to see in medicine. Definitely not. I goof around way too much, and I don't think I could be a great doctor. So the answer to that is no medical school for me. So the question is, how can we network with other Black and Latinx scientists across the world? You know, networking is one of the most important things you could ever do. If Nick hasn't told you that already, well, I'm going to reinforce it because I'm 99% sure that Nick already, actually, I'm 120% sure Nick told you networking is so important. So because she has already said that, I'm going to let you guys know that if you don't network, right, it's very, very difficult. Like as a Black professional, as a Black scientist, I want you guys to know that you need to be able to connect with all of us. And we are just an email away. I think you guys need to understand that. And we want to hear from you guys. If you can't find our email, get on LinkedIn. We have LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a professional account where you can network with folks. And it's so important to know how to network with one another. And I think the other part of it is really showing what you're interested in. If you're interested in neurology, yes, network with people that are, in neurology. If you're interested in just watching someone do surgery, totally okay with me, right? So I think when I reached out to Dr. Curry when I was just 17 years old, I emailed him and I said, "Hi, Dr. William Curry. My name is Alazar. I'm interested in watching surgery in your, whatnot." And he said, "Oh, that sounds perfect." And I told him, but the caveat is I'm 17. He said, "Don't worry about it." And I'm sure if you guys have met him and if you guys have seen him, you guys see how chill he is. He's, I think, like by far the coolest dude ever. So if you guys have actually had a chance to talk to him and have actually seen him present, he's very cool. If he if he was like, very, very kind of reserved, that's how he can be sometimes, but he's very cool. So, I went, saw the surgery. At the end of it, he gave me what's known as you guys know, he kind of dapped me up and he was like, "I'll see you soon, brother." That's literally all he said to me. So it's so important to know that we have one another's back and we also want to network with each other because what we're doing in the long term and in the short term is significant. And so the short term network, so important. The long term network, just as important. Whatever you're interested in, find the people. We're all there. Ooh, okay, let's see this long-winded one. How were you able to get these research opportunities in high school? Do you have any tips to get an internship/lab opportunity without any prior experience? So I'm going to kind of answer that in twofold. All right. So question one is, how are you able to get these research opportunities in high school? Simply applying. I think there are so many programs for minorities, so many programs for people like me and people like you and people like, all of us, right? To participate in these awesome programs and opportunities. Apply. And what happens if you don't get in? Is probably going to be your next question. So what happens if you don't get in? What happens? You guys can type it in the chat. I'm going to encourage the chat thing. What do you do? Yeah, apply to another. Keep applying. You don't just apply to one, right? It's just like applying to college. You don't apply to one college and hope that, you don't put all of your bet in one bucket. That's bad, right? So you guys already know that. So it's very important to keep applying to different programs, but also to not lose faith in yourself. You're cool already. Trust me. People want to see you. People want you in their program. Sometimes it's just administrative stuff. Sometimes it's logistical. Sometimes they just didn't see your application, or someone just wasn't looking at your application. So what's a really important thing to do too? To follow up, to say, "Hey, why didn't I get into the program?" Being persistent, being that person who says, "Hey, can you just let me know what I did wrong just so I can learn from it?" And having that opportunity to actually take criticism from an adult is very important. To say, you know, we thought you were a great candidate will be something that someone will say to you. But, you know, during your interview, you kind of weren't really looking at us. You were kind of looking down on the floor, right? Eye contact, very important, a very important thing to be able to share with others. The other component also is really being able to kind of diversify, right? You don't know, well, you know, if you're interested in neurology, it doesn't mean you just jump to neurology, right? Go try oncology, go try another one, right? Go try nephrology, so the study of the kidney. So go and figure out different things too. It's not just one program that fits all. Because what happens if you go into neurology at the age of 16 and don't like it? Right? And then you keep going with neurology, keep going with neurology, and you end up hating it. And you know that means you have no experience in something else. Diversify. Go try to learn other things. You're so young. I'm almost 30 years old and I'm doing my PhD. Just wanting to throw that out there for you guys. Almost 30 and doing a PhD. That's a struggle. All right. And there's actually people who are older than me doing it. So I totally feel comfortable now. And experience is something you get along the way, by the way, just to kind of address the previous question. Experience is something you get along the way, and everyone knows that. So don't worry too much about experience. What advice would you give to students who want to gain more clinical experience in a hospital setting during the current pandemic? Most hospitals have temporarily stopped shadowing and volunteering. Absolutely. Everything has gone virtual. I'm assuming you guys are all gone virtual as well. Now, if you want to get clinical experience, I can give you guys some really cool opportunities. One is just ask virtually. You know, say, hey, can I join in your telemedicine call? I'm assuming Dr. Nick Day is actually reaching out to her patients via Zoom. You know, if she needs to write a prescription to her patients, I'm 99% sure she's doing it via Zoom. And they're not coming to MGH because MGH is just a massive hospital. And, you know, wherever community she's going into, it's very, very safe. So she needs to make sure the safety of her patients, right, is the priority of her work. And as a result, she probably has to do it via Zoom. So why not say, hey, can I participate or can I just listen into your call with your patient? Can I participate and just watch how you guys are interacting via Zoom? That's a really cool way to do it. The other is also, it's a pandemic. We really need to think about pandemics. I think it's so important to know that your safety, your family's safety, I think as a young person, we forget. And also as people who come from, you know, a diverse background, your grandparents could live with you. And what are you risking when you do go out? When you go out to volunteer, when you go out to do these things, your grandparents could be immunocompromised. My grandma lived with us for a very long time, and I think now that she kind of lives on her own. But because she lives on her own, though, it's like imagine if she had lived with us and this pandemic happened. I have to think 3, 4, 5 times ahead, right, before something can happen because I'm actually consistently in contact with my grandmother. So it's just so important to really understand that. Will you work full time while doing your PhD? Can you explain that application process a little bit? What field you're going into? All right, so this is a 3-layered question. Let's see if I can zip through that. Yes, I will be technically working full time, so I only get to take 1 day a week off, but that doesn't really affect anything because I'll be available via email. So it just means I just can't be on a meeting or anything like that. So if things were to happen, I can definitely respond back via email. But 1 day a week, I'm strictly focused in class, but obviously we mentioned the pandemic. So because it's a pandemic, I actually have the fortunate ability to just listen to recordings. So I'm actually listening to recorded classrooms now. So it's literally sitting there, just listening to my professor talk via Zoom about a topic. And there's a presentation on the right-hand side. There's a screen that I get to watch my professor talk in and draw on the board. So all of that is going to be available. But 1 day a week, I actually have to go and do what's known as anatomy and physiology. So actually, I have to go cut up a cadaver, a human cadaver, and actually learn about body parts. But that's the only day a week, but that's only 4 hours or 6 hours, depending on how long it's going to be. But that's really what we get to do. My application process was a little different. So it wasn't like the traditional, you know, you have to go and apply and then do your GRE. And then after your GRE, you have to go to an interview and all that. My application process was very unique simply because I'm doing a very unique programming that's tied to a company and it's also tied to a school system. As a result of it, one of the key things that we're trying to do, or one of the things that Biogen is doing with me, is that I just had to get an email from our executives who support the fact that I'll do a PhD. So executives are basically the people who run our company. Nikta, you've had the fortunate opportunity of meeting both Al and Sharfi. They're actually my recommendation letter writers. So that's their support was involved in that. So the chief medical officer and the chief commercial officer were involved in kind of making sure that I was able to participate in the PhD program. The other part of it is also the interview. So I actually had to go sit through an interview for about an hour um, with I believe the dean of the department, so of neurology and then neuroanatomy. And what was really awesome about that was we kind of just talked about, well, how can we balance work for you, and how can we also balance your education? So it was that. So it was very unique and different. And so as a result of it, it's so important to understand that every case will be different, and it's not about the generic testing and all that. So for me, I had a chance not to have to take a GRE, so I don't even have to take a GRE. I just have to apply and demonstrate that I am adequate and also intelligent and all those things. And I demonstrated that through my essay. So I wrote an essay, gave a presentation along with all of the other recommendation letters, as well as the interview that came along. And then what field am I going into? So I'm actually going into neurology, so anatomy and neurobio. So a big part of the requirements for my PhD is actually teaching anatomy, so human anatomy, so muscles, vascular system, everything else, but also neurology. So really talking about cell parts, but also neuroanatomy, so how they actually interact with the spine and everything else. And then trying to bring all of the stuff that I learned there back to Biogen to kind of do some research. So it's going to be very interesting. My research topic hopefully will be in Alzheimer's disease, and it's going to be focused on really getting an inside scoop on how certain proteins interact. So things like amyloid beta and how we can actually track that. If you hadn't had a chance to learn about amyloid beta, it's a very important one. Hopefully you've had a talk on that. And then talk a little bit about what's known as tau proteins and tau degradation and how that happens in patients with Alzheimer's. So those are kind of the two things that I've been kind of fiddling back and forth with, but there's definitely a lot more coming. So hopefully next year or in 2 years, I can give you a better update. How did your high school internships influence your courses and or any undergraduate research placement in college? Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story. Aw, okay, that was very emotional. So we'll start with the high school internships. High school internships are amazing opportunities for you to just to actually open your eyes a little bit. I think it's so important to really know that when you open your eyes just a little bit to what you could actually be doing in your future, it helps you a lot, especially for people like us, right? So as a Black man, it's not like, you know, my dad was a scientist growing up. It wasn't like he knew people who were going to get me involved in science. That wasn't a thing for us, especially growing up with my younger sister, who now is actually studying medicine. So she's actually taking her USMLE, by the way. And so she's taking the exam, I think, next Tuesday. But what's really awesome is that we didn't have a lot of mentors, and we didn't have a lot of people in our family who were already in the field, and that already makes us at the disadvantaged pole, right? So I already have a disadvantage to that. But how do you kind of use that, and how do you kind of take these internships and find mentors? What these opportunities do for you is you can actually find a mentor by simply asking someone to say, hey, I really want you to be my mentor. I don't know what this is like, and this isn't something my family is, you know, very good at, or, you know, being vulnerable with someone is so important. I remember when I first asked my very first ever mentor, I literally walked over to him and I said, hey, Will, and this isn't Dr. Curry, no, this is a different Will. I literally walked over to Will and I said, hey, Will, just want to let you know that I don't come from a family of scientists. And it's not like my dad has a friend who's a scientist or things like that. So it's so important for it's so important for you to just share with me like what I should be doing, where I should be focused, how I should be kind of taking these directions, just to know where I should be going. So really making sure you find those mentors, but also being vulnerable with your mentor is very important, just to share out what thoughts that they may have, because at the end of the day, you're trying to get somewhere, and a mentor's job is to help you get there, and their job is to also lift you up when you can't really lift yourself up, right? So that's what a mentor does. And then that's literally a very positive influence in your internship as well. And then I think you talked about undergraduate research placement in college. Yeah, look for those too. You just have to keep looking. I think I have to remind you guys, you have to keep looking. It's really easy to find a lab to work for, but it's also really hard to find. So the hard part is finding a lab that you want to stay in, all right? finding a lab to stay in is different from finding a lab to work in. So you can just go into a lab and work, but only you make that lab, right, better, right? Only you make that experience better for you. Only you get to make it sweet, right? For example, we all take coffee, right? And so everyone drinks coffee or tea or some kind of warm beverage. I like mine, you know, maybe some of you guys would like yours with some sugar. Some of you guys might like yours with cream. So this is different flavors. You bring a different flavor to the lab. And it's so important to remember what kind of flavor you bring. And if that flavor, right, that you bring into it tastes sweet, right, that means you're enjoying yourself there. It means that you're enjoying your placement. You're enjoying what you're getting out of it because you're learning something. It's not the same thing you're doing over and over again. If you're doing the same thing over and over again, as Albert Einstein said, right, as Albert Einstein said, you're doing the same thing over and over again and you're expecting different results, that's insanity. So don't be insane. Be sane, right? So to be sane, make sure you're learning something along the way. It's so important to know that you're learning. So hopefully you guys are getting a chance to learn. What is the most rewarding part of your job? Ooh. I think watching a student go from high school to college or from college to graduate school. So I get a chance to mentor a lot of students. So, you know, one of the greatest parts about doing what I do is a few things. One is I see students go from sixth grade to eighth grade, right, seventh, eighth, and then watching them go from eighth grade to high school. It is a joy to see someone mature, and it is a joy to see someone also remember me. Like literally, they point to me in the middle of the street. All right, so I live in Cambridge, and some of the students obviously go to school in Cambridge. Some of the students obviously go to school in Somerville, and these are the two communities I happen to like drive my car by, or go to grocery stores and things in. So when you've seen all of the sixth graders of Somerville and all of the sixth graders of Cambridge, they grow up, right? So a few years later, they're like stalking you, like randomly, like, they're pushing the carriage in the grocery store and they're just like, oh, it's that guy, it's that guy. So I think the most rewarding part is to hear the word, it's that guy, and then to turn around and say, you came to the community lab, can you just say hello and stop whispering underneath your tongue, right? So that means that, these students are literally getting a chance to catch up with me. So I actually ask the difficult questions. What are you doing nowadays? Where are you nowadays? So I think the most rewarding part is being able to ask students that, but also to watching these students mature. I think watching students go to college is the other big, great, I think, opportunities of my job that I think not a whole lot of people get to see. So watching you guys go to college and pursuing the more advanced degree, and wherever it is, that's the best part. Some students will go into finance, and I'm just like, you're still in math, so you're still in STEM technically. Or some students will say, I actually don't like science that much, and now I'm going into like economics, and I'm just like, it's technically STEM, but okay, right? So it's just really about making sure that you guys get a chance to think about those, and I think watching that is so rewarding, and watching you guys grow up. I feel like this really, really um, I want to say I feel like this great person who gets to see you guys grow up, and it just at the same time gives me joy watching how you guys go from one point of life to another, but also seeing the development. All right, what soft skills outside of academia do you feel are most important? Beyond knowledge, I would have to definitely say being able to talk. I think you need to know how to talk to people. Having a light heart is so important. I think being able to joke is very important with people because everyone has a rough day already. I think we all are dealing with emails. We all deal with, I think, communicating with someone. We all have things that we have to report. We all have PowerPoint presentations to make. We all have, scientists that we have to make sure that we're pleasing and the data looks good. And all of that is just so stressful as it is. But I think having a very light heart is very important. So being able to communicate with a light heart is very nice because already you're under a lot of pressure. As a high school student, I know you guys are under a lot of pressure. You guys are thinking about SATs. For those of you who haven't taken SATs yet, you guys are thinking about this virtual world you're in right now. So being able to just share, hello, how's everyone doing? Just wanted to make sure you guys are okay. Just that little tiny phrase is so important. So that's a very important soft skill to me. I think being able to communicate and being able to just tell people that, you're here for them. We go back to serving others. So important to be able to serve others. So make sure that you're just getting a chance to do that. As a freshman in college, do you have any advice for me? And so I'm assuming the student is a freshman. So as a freshman in college, do you have any advice for me on how to decide what classes I want to take and potential concentration? How did the decision happen for you? So, when I was a freshman in college, I knew I wanted to be a bio major. So as a result, I went and took bio classes, obviously. So I took bio, I took, chemistry 101, bio 101, and then I didn't have to take any of my math classes. I was very good at math, so I was able to, opt out of testing for those. But take your psychology classes, take your, philosophy. I think one of the things that we don't get a chance to do, especially if you're majoring in science, is the philosophy. Get a chance to get into philosophy. Get a chance to read a book because an instructor told you to dissect a book. I think that's such an important skill set to have. So try to think about that. Your concentration should also be somewhat tied to what you're interested in. If you're majoring in biology, try to major in something, or try to have a concentration in something completely different. If you're majoring in biology, don't go into chemistry. If you're majoring in biology, don't concentrate on biochemistry. If you're majoring in biology, don't concentrate in, bioinformatics, because you'll learn the process along the way, and the only differences are probably one or two classes. Go and concentrate on something else. I think that's the advice I'd give. For me, I majored in biology, but I concentrated in political science and history. I loved history. History was fun, so I took American history for fun in high school, and I really enjoyed American history and learning about that. And then I had already met all of the different perspectives of. I already have met all of the requirements for history, so it was just very simple for me to just major in history and political science. And as I'm in my career now, I'm realizing how important those skill sets were in learning about political science and history, because they are so pivotal in my science skills. So knowing the history of how a machine is made, why it was so important to have certain tools that came up out of certain generations and certain time points in history, kind of connecting it with actual history, like, not to say like this, the tool history isn't important, but why a PCR machine came out of the 80s, the impact of that, and why what was actually happening across the world during that time. Being able to connect those is so important. I think so when you concentrate in different areas, take it with grace and just enjoy it.
I know we're at about time, but there was one more question on there that I wanted to scroll through, but I didn't know if it would pop up on the screen. But one of them said, where do you see yourself or in the field or in your own life in 10 years?
It's a great question. In 10 years. So I never really saw myself here 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I did not expect that I would be doing this. So I think over time, it's so important to remember that you don't have to go in a direction where everyone is going. All right. So just because, my friends majored in biology, did their pre-med, and then went and got their, MDs, and then, are now working in residency and doing that, it doesn't mean I needed to do that. So recognize that. That's one. And the second part of it is also to think about the fact that 10 years from now, I don't know where I'll be. This pandemic definitely was not a part of the equation. Definitely not. But if I had my hopes and dreams, it would definitely be, again, continuing this work. I think this work that we get to do with students, so important. And I think the other part of it is also running my own lab. I think it'd be really nice just to run a lab at Biogen and running my own department. So that'd be really cool. So we'll see how that goes. So come ask me in 10 years. And maybe it's a whole different world.
We'll touch base in 10 years and we'll do this again just to give an update. Well, those are all the questions we have and the time we're at, and I want to be respectful, but thank you so much for going through all those with us. I know some of them were a little longer, but I hope our students got a good sense of your insights.
Well, thank you guys for having me. This is really wonderful. You guys have been fantastic. Continue to pursue science. I know it's hard for those of you who are in science right now, who are struggling. Struggle's going to happen. You'll be all right. I promise you that. If you're in organic chemistry and you're in college, guess what? That's going to get worse. So enjoy it. But the point of all of that is to really let you guys know that it happens and you're just going at it. And sometimes it's so important to remember that your dream doesn't stop here, right? There are ways to figure out what your dreams are, and there are ways for you to really accomplish your dreams. Just keep going.
That's really amazing. I've been so inspired. This is our very last Inspire session of the summer, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today and joining us over the last few weeks. I'm going to close this. I took notes, and I'm going to close this with the tips that Alazar shared with us. Always believe in others, share what you know, work hard, and have faith in yourself and others. How amazing is that? I hope everyone has enjoyed this as much as I have, and that you have a wonderful rest of your day. thank you for all for being here, especially you, Alazar.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so, so much. Everyone have a great Monday and a great rest of your week.